Welcome to the podcast, Restore Yourself, Restore Your Marriage, where it's all about discovering the thoughts that get you in the mood, the thoughts that get you out of the mood, and how creating a deeper connection with yourself creates a deeper connection with your spouse. I'm your coach, Shelly Anderson, coaching you through life, love, and intimacy. This is episode number 80, Healthy Holiday Boundaries.
Oh, that sounds good.
Yes.
And also, this is our first time recording video for this podcast. So anybody listening, you can also catch this on YouTube. Our channel is Anderson Coaching on YouTube, and we'll put the link in this podcast and also in the email if you receive one. And so this is another step toward our adventure in taking this to the next level and hopefully reaching more people and helping more people. So we're really excited to start this YouTube adventure as well. But anyone who wants to listen to it on the podcast will continue to do that as well.
Yes. And I love the idea of being able to offer this through the format of podcasting, but also being able to expand it through YouTube because this is free content. And part of our mission in helping marriages is to be able to provide a lot of help for free. It's not just about like how much money can we get, so being able to start a YouTube channel with these podcasts is just being able to really help more people who a lot of them can't afford it. So this is just...
Or just don't want to pay for it. And hopefully we provide enough free content that it will help you. And you don't need to spend a cent, and you can hopefully glean a lot of the things that we talk about. But if you do want more, then there's going to be a lot more to come. And we are going to try to make at least a little bit of a living in all the coaching that we're going to be doing. So we're going to charge for some things, but we're going to try to give as much free content away as we possibly can, because we really think that it doesn't matter who the person is. They should be able to glean something and improve their life and improve their marriage and their relationship. So we're very excited to take this next step.
Yes. Okay, so we are recording this the week before Christmas. So this is a very interesting time because we have, I think most of us can say we know people or have experienced ourselves a lot of happiness, but also a lot of stress and frustration. And a lot of times I've heard clients become very stressed about who they're spending a lot of time with during the holidays, namely, maybe not the family that they live with, but the extras, right? Like the extended family. And it's a struggle because they really want to have positive, good, close relationships with them. But then they know that during these holidays, there are so many opportunities for things to go wrong. And they've experienced that. And so they can go into these family events with a high amount of stress. They're super defensive. They're on guard. And so it's almost like they're just ready, ready for the battle, and can maybe quickly engage in battles that they probably don't even need to engage in.
Well, I think this is something that people have been dealing with since the beginning of time. But also, our society is so divided, even in families right now. And so I think it's okay for us, and we should set boundaries, because if we don't, then we may end up in conversations or in contentious situations with family members, and that can hurt our relationship. So if you know you're going into a situation like that, then you should think about these things.
Yeah. And I think also something that really does come up is the concept of loneliness. And I'm guessing that most of us can relate to the idea of being in a room with a lot of people that we know and probably love and still feel alone.
I feel alone all the time. Except when I'm just with you. My children even make me feel alone.
Right. And so sometimes when we think about the idea of setting boundaries with people and especially our family, we go into that idea thinking, oh no, that's going to cause more separation and therefore more loneliness. But the truth of setting boundaries and healthy boundaries is that it actually creates more closeness. Because if you set them up in the right way and from a place of love, instead of a place of like anger and frustration and just like feeling like you're at your limit, then you actually set up boundaries that are super productive and super successful, and they allow you to enjoy the beauties of the relationship without some of the other stuff getting in the way. So they actually help improve relationships. But most people don't think about it that way at first.
Well, most people feel an obligation and a duty to be with all their family during the holidays.
Yeah.
Just because that's what we do. That's what we're supposed to do, or that's what's expected of me. Well, you know what? To hell with that. Seriously, like think about what is best for you and your immediate family, like your spouse and your children. And sometimes we do have to sacrifice because we want others to have good relationships and good experiences with others and our families. And we're pro-family, don't get us wrong. I mean, we love being with our families, but we have both had experiences throughout our lives where we realize that things would be much better if we had more specific boundaries, even if we don't tell the other person what the boundary is.
Right.
We just know what our boundary is so that we can be happy and enjoy the holidays for what it really means. And it doesn't mean being miserable, but for a lot of reasons, we tend to be miserable during the holidays when it should really be a time of joy. And it takes work, I think, to really enjoy the holidays and time with family. And there are things that we know are coming, but we don't really prepare for it. But there are ways to prepare and ways to, I think, really rationally make decisions so that we're not stuck in a situation that just makes us feel like crap. That's not what the holidays should be about. Really,
No.
It should be about, for us, Christmas is about worshiping our Savior and really deepening our understanding of Him and how He brings peace and happiness into our lives. It's not about worshiping our family.
Yeah. So I think that with boundaries, they do seem scary at first because a lot of times, this is not something we're taught in elementary school or high school. A lot of times not even in college unless we choose to take a class that addresses this stuff. And so we may hear about boundaries and then be like, I got to draw lines that separate me and other people. Like, how do I even do that? It sounds a little bit daunting. And so they do take a little bit of work and a little bit of thought, but they are some of the most amazing things we can do for relationships. And they actually create a high level of intimacy. And so even in marriage, there are ways to set up boundaries that don't make the marriage relationship worse, they make it better. It's just we're not used to thinking about boundaries in that way. And so I think it's really important to think about boundaries as it's not a way to keep people out of our lives. It's actually a way to keep them in our lives, but just in a way that doesn't allow them to walk all over us or to violate some of our personal and emotional spaces that keep us emotionally healthy.
And our responsibilities and our accountability for what our responsibility is. Like, I know a lot of people have a problem with like in-laws or even their own mother because when they're around them, they start mothering their grandchildren or mothering their children, telling them how they should parent, or, there's all kinds of baggage that, maybe is even unsaid when you're together.
Yeah.
I kind of got off topic there, but I'm gonna do that a lot because like going through my mind is like all kinds of stuff that even my mom taught me. It's interesting because my mother raised 7 children, and she always said, "I'm raising 7 independent children," and I think we're all pretty independent, but we're so independent that she feels lonely now because we don't need her as much.
Mm-hmm.
But I think that's okay, right? We're not supposed to need our mommy, even though I do need my mommy sometimes, right? Every once in a while. I even called her the other day. I'm like, I just needed to talk to my mom.
Yeah.
Because I love my mom. But I'm grateful that she set boundaries with her parents. And I think, that's one of the reasons why she grew up in Seattle, in the Seattle area, and we moved to California, and she never wanted to live near her family. Not because she didn't like them, but because of healthy boundaries. And so I give my mom credit for that. But sometimes it goes the opposite direction, right? It kind of backfires at a certain point down the road, because maybe you set boundaries and maybe you're the one who ends up regretting the boundaries that you set someday. So think about them in the long term. But I think overall it's really good, and it's a better thing, and it's healthier, even though you may miss your children someday when they don't need you.
Right. Well, and I think one of the most important things to think about when you're contemplating setting a boundary with someone in your life is to expect that person is going to continue acting the way they've always been acting, right? Because as adults, we're not supposed to go around changing everybody and controlling everybody and telling them what to do all the time. Can you imagine if all adults did this? All adults try to do this until they learn better. But as a responsible adult, you're in charge of you. You're not in charge of other responsible adults. And even if they're totally messing things up, that's for them to figure out. But the best first step is to say, okay, this person, every time we're together around the holidays, they do this.
Mm-hmm.
And so this year, they are going to continue to do this. So we should expect them to keep on doing the thing that they have always done that we don't like. Because then we can kind of start to figure out why we need to set a boundary. What about that bugs us, and how to set up a boundary? If we don't think of some of the specifics, it's going to get a little bit more challenging. So when this person does what they always will do, how am I going to handle me?
Yes.
It's not how am I going to handle them. It's how am I going to handle myself.
So what you're saying is you don't need to just avoid everybody.
Correct.
So boundaries doesn't mean I'm building a wall and I don't want to see that person because I don't like how I feel when I'm around them. You're saying, well, you're going to be around people that you love, that you might not like in certain situations. And what you're about to talk about is how to handle that and how to change your thinking and your expectations and to prepare for what you already know is coming.
Yes. Yes. So if you look at boundaries, I think there's definitely two types of boundaries. There are boundaries that are unspoken. These are boundaries that you are going to really take the time to think about ahead of time. You're going to prepare them, and they never need to be spoken to the other person. There's no confrontation there. This is the beauty of one of these boundaries and why it's so effective. And so I hope for anyone listening, grab onto this because this is non-confrontational. And confrontation has usually been a really big challenge for me. I'm getting better at it. But this is one of the reasons I really love this one. So there's unspoken boundaries and spoken boundaries. Now, I really do want to focus on these unspoken boundaries. And I have a few examples, personal examples. And one of them has to do with a really good friend of mine from my early 20s. And we were really good friends. I would say maybe even best friends. And she had depression. And I knew this, and we talked about it quite a bit. And then there came a time where we moved in together and we were roommates. And so I knew what I was going into. I was pretty much aware of it. What I didn't know is really the intensity of it and how that would actually look like and play out when we actually lived together. And so once we had been living together for about maybe 4 or 5 months, then I really started to see, okay, it's different to live with somebody who has this level of depression. I wasn't totally prepared for this. And I'm going to be honest. It would have been the easy thing to say, hey, our lease is coming up. I'm out of here. This is too much to handle, right? I think the easy thing is going to be to just be I'm done. Let's just cut this thing off. It's going to be easier. But I really loved her. I loved our friendship. She's a great person. And so what I did was I just started to observe myself. And this is long before I knew what boundaries was. Now I can look back and be like, oh my gosh, I was setting a boundary. I really started to observe kind of like what she was doing and how I was responding. And I just started to pay attention to like, how long am I in a really good place with her while she's like talking through some of her challenges and difficulties before it really starts to take a toll on me and my own mental and emotional health. And I learned that I had a 2.5 hour time span where I could just be a really good friend. I could be a good listener. I wasn't bothered. I wasn't mad or annoyed, or I was never like, not this again, right? It was like, I wanted to be a good friend. I liked it. But I learned that at about the 2.5 hour mark of listening to her, I felt myself really start to kind of come down with her. And I was like, well, that's no good. That's not good for me. That's not good for her. That's not good for our friendship. And if we're both heading downhill, that I just don't think that that's the best case scenario. And so I didn't say, hey, I need you to change all your depression. You need to change your meds because of how it's affecting me. I decided to go with this unspoken boundary and say, okay, I'm going to be the best friend I can be for 2.5 hours. And at that time, I'm going to make sure that I kind of say, you know what? I love you. And I'm so glad you feel like you can talk to me. I'm supposed to be somewhere right now, and it just makes sure that I had that. I knew what was coming next and that I had my own exit strategy for my health. And it really kept the relationship intact. So when she did start to talk to me and I knew it was going to be well, I was never mad. Yeah. It never bothered me because once I made that boundary for myself, I didn't have any of those negative feelings towards her.
I mean, this is something that everyone can learn from, but also this is something we can help our children with.
Yeah.
Right. So those of you that have children, we hear all the time from our kids about, friends that they have a hard time with. And I think all of our children have friends like this. And
our kids might be some of those.
Yeah, and exactly. And our kids may be someone that, we do have children that others can only handle for a very short amount of time. And your children may be those people too. But if we can teach our kids this, really simple lesson about time limits even, that's such a simple thing. Yeah. Right? And you don't have to even teach them not to say, well, I can only handle you for a half hour.
No, you don't have to tell them at all.
You don't have to say that at all. But, hopefully you can have these conversations with your children and share this with them because it'll help them become much better friends younger. Yeah. Right? You learn this when you're like in your 20s. Yes. Right? And we can teach our children this, and we do have these conversations, and I'm grateful that you've learned that lesson because even I've learned from that. So this is great for all family relationships, but this is also something that's great to teach your kids.
Yeah, it's so true. And why should we just dismiss, right, and avoid family members when if we just take the time to set up our own personal boundary, then we can be there. We can really continue to grow and develop the relationship in a way that doesn't, bring both of us down or where one gets taken advantage of.
Well, how many times have we been in a situation, maybe it's with my family and I'm having a great time and you're like, okay, I'm ready to go, or vice versa, where if we talk about it beforehand, again, we're talking about this together. It's not just you having this conversation with yourself. Yeah. When we're talking about family, it affects both of us. And so, maybe there's like a sign or a signal or a word that you can say so your spouse or your significant other, whoever it is, knows, okay, they've had enough. It's time to go. Because for me, when I've had enough, I start saying I've had enough and I'm kind of outspoken about it. Like I'll say, I've had enough of this. I got to go. We got to go. I'm done. And I probably have hurt a lot of people's feelings over time, but it's because those are times when I didn't have a conversation with you And I start getting frustrated because you just keep talking, and I can tell you're excited. I mean, we've had those situations a lot.
Yeah.
And, sometimes you even know that I'm ready to go and you're just kind of like, just get over it. But you don't know how upset I am in that moment, or how stressed I am, or I'm ready to walk out and, leave you behind. But that's because we hadn't set that boundary also. Right. So it works in all different directions.
Well, and I think it's important to also bring up, when we're talking about personal boundaries and even couple boundaries, we've never talked about in those situations where you could also have a personal boundary within that situation. I hadn't thought about that till you brought it up, where we could be at a family function, because I'm sure this is going to come up for everybody. You're at a family function, it's for the holidays, one spouse is ready to go, the other's not.
Right.
But I think this is still going to be applicable, right? Because you could still have a boundary where you're like, okay, I'm done. I need to go to the gas station.
Yeah.
The car is running low on gas. I need to run to the gas station, and I need to go to Smith's.
I need to make a phone call. Right?
Right. And that's a personal boundary where it allows really both of us to still do the things that keep us in a really healthy place and still allow for the other spouse to do the same.
Yeah, because if I'm like, let's go, now all of a sudden everyone's like, what's wrong with him?
And I'm going to be mad.
Yeah, and you're going to be mad, but I could just, I got to go make a phone call. or else I've got to go get something at the store. Yeah, it's not difficult. It just takes a little communication. So this really is communication.
There is communication as well. There's no doubt. Another example that I had thought about was when I worked at a restaurant in my early 20s, and there was a manager there. And yes, she was a manager. She liked to make it very clear that she was the manager. But she was also a one-upper. She loved to be the expert on everything, even things that were not related to the restaurant business. She was an expert in everything.
Well, everyone should be lucky to be around her.
And at first I was like, oh my gosh, who is this lady? Like, how am I going to get along with someone who's just like, it doesn't matter what you're talking about, right? I could have been talking about a dance project I was doing in junior college, and she could have been like, hey, I took a class in dance, and I took it from this person, and I got a certification, and it's like, it didn't matter what you were talking about. She was the expert. She's always going to one-up you.
But it probably wasn't like Kristen Wiig on Saturday Night Live, when she's the one-upper, when it's actually all true. It ends up all being true, that she is the best and is whatever it is.
Oh, it's so funny.
Yeah, usually people who are like that, they've got their own challenges, which is why they're like that. But
yeah,
that's tough.
But and I remember I was like, wait, she's a good person. Like, and I had talked to people who would kind of be like bragging about stuff, but I never had to be with them for long periods of time where I was like, this is my job. I want to keep this job. I want to get along with her. And so I really had to look inward and kind of say, like, how am I going to handle her? How am I going to handle me? I can't tell her what to do. She's my boss. And so I really just took a step back, and I was like, okay, so that's on me. I don't have the skill of knowing how to deal with someone who thinks they're an expert in everything. I've never really dealt with this much time with a one-upper. Okay, well, I guess I need to develop my skills. Once I was able to kind of look at myself that way, like, this is an opportunity to develop my skills so that I can get along with more people and have more relationships, and not just like, I can only get along with this type of person. I looked at her so differently because then I was actually intrigued. I became very curious about her, and it was genuine, where I was like, okay, I'm going to talk about this because me and these other, waiters and servers, we were like really into, whatever we were doing. And I would just like kind of talk about these things around her and then just wait to see what she was going to say. And I was like, how is she going to be the expert in this? And I actually enjoyed it. Whereas before I found it almost like offensive, or like she thinks she's smarter than me. She thinks she's better. She wants to always be the best. And then I realized, well, that's not her motive. She just is like that. She doesn't know any better. She's not trying to hurt my feelings. I never felt like she was trying to hurt my feelings.
She probably wasn't trying to hurt you. She was, for whatever reason, trying to make herself feel better, or else that was a habit she was in and didn't realize it. There's so many reasons why people are that way or anyway. And if we just, just say, oh, talk to the hand and go away, I think a lot of people that we don't like because of reasons like that end up being really close friends too.
Totally.
When we let that happen. And if we don't, then we'll never know the good side of them if we don't take the time to, think through, like you did, ways to, I guess, tolerate it.
Yeah. And I think just by thinking about that, right? Because I was like, I didn't want to just tolerate it in a way where I was going to be miserable. Mm-hmm. But when I looked at it from through the lens of, I'm lacking a skill with people who are like this. That's me. I'm lacking those skills. And I actually really enjoyed the idea of self-development when somebody's like that. And I just had never thought about it that way. And I actually just learned to love her and enjoy her. And I was like, I can't wait to hear what she says about this. And not in a mean way or a belittling way. It was none of that. It was real and genuine because I was like, this is how this person operates.
You were curious.
I was very curious, and it made our relationship so much better. And I have been so grateful for that because I really did feel like it really allowed me to love her for who she was without being like trying to, get my own little jabs in of like, oh, well, here's how I'm an expert too, or here's how I'm going to one up you with whatever. It just leaves all of that behind. There's no room for it.
And I also think in marriage, you don't just marry, your spouse, you marry into their family too. Most of the time there's others that come along with them. And this is a whole nother family that has different traditions and different ways of being and different habits and customs and all that. I mean, your family, half your dad's side, they're from Peru, and I love that culture. But there's also some things that come along with that I wasn't used to. I mean,
Right.
I wasn't used to people just so openly being like, "Oh, hey, Nick, how's it going?" Give me a hug, and then say, "Oh, you've put on a lot of weight." I'm like, well, yeah, but like usually, like we don't say that out loud, right? I already know that, but I know that's coming, right? If I lose weight or gain weight, it doesn't matter. Someone's going to talk about my weight,
Right.
but they're going to tell me, you're so cute, fat, right, or something like that. I'm like, come on, this is ridiculous. But again, it's one of these things I've had to learn how to enjoy the entirety of your family, because there's way more good than bad. And if I just let someone get to me, like, just because they're not meaning to hurt my feelings, they're just different that way than we are here in the United States. And in this culture, we tiptoe around stuff like that. They're so loving. And like, when I really started to get to know your family, like, I don't see my family and give them kisses. But when I see your family, we give kisses right on the cheeks.
Yeah.
And it's very warm, and so the good far outweighs those little things. But I could have easily over the years let that bug me, like, oh, these are, what's going on with these people,
Right.
But I love it. I wish we were more like that.
Right. Like in my mind, I'm thinking of these one-uppers, right? Especially around the holidays. I've heard this one quite a bit where there's a one-upper in the family and she always wants to have the best gift, the biggest gift, the most thoughtful gift, right? And setting up a personal boundary has nothing to do with what you're going to control the other person to say or do, or, how they go about their gift giving. It has nothing to do with that. But if you know that every year they come and then they're going to have their big story about how they discovered this one gift and Oh, how they just knew it was going to be the perfect one for grandma and grandpa. It's like, I'm sure we all know somebody like this. Setting up a personal boundary is going to say, okay, they're going to do that this year and every year, probably. How am I going to respond? How am I going to respond? How do I want to respond? What kind of person do I want to be in this situation? How do I want to feel towards this person? And then decide some of those things ahead of time. If they're always going to be bragging about their gift and how much time, how am I going to respond? Maybe we have some responses that we have prepared ahead of time before those negative emotions come up, right? We're doing it when we're in a good place and we're thinking about, hey, I want this relationship to continue to improve. That means our brain is not flooded by all the stress hormones and chemicals. And so we're in a really good place to be able to do this type of work and say, okay, maybe I'm going to respond by saying, you know what? I really admire the time that you spend to find these kinds of gifts, right?
Yeah.
That doesn't take away from the gift I gave. And it doesn't like make her better than anyone else.
But that's a natural response, right? Like without any of these tools, without thinking it through, I think most people naturally are going to feel bad or angry or upset or jealous. I mean, all those negative emotions creep in if you don't prepare. And that person that you're thinking may not be the one that hurt your feelings.
Yeah.
It may be someone else who you didn't expect to do that, but now you're still prepared for whatever that is, knowing that it really could be anybody.
Yeah. Yeah. And so I think taking the time to come up with maybe at least 3 responses, right? Because it's probably not just going to be only one response and then that handles everything for the night, right? Have a couple in your back pocket. Sometimes when I'm really practicing a new boundary and I'm not used to it and the words aren't coming out, and I'm nervous that the words won't come out as clear, I just write them down or I put them on my phone and have them ready. And, but I think it's so good to have a few in mind. Another one I'd thought of in this type of scenario would be like, man, I look forward to being able to do that as well sometime. Because in all honesty, I do.
Yeah.
Right now with 5 kids and starting a business from scratch, I don't have that time. Like I give myself a time limit. It's like, you have this much time to think about gifts and purchase them. And I feel really good about that. And that's good enough for me now. But someday when my schedule loosens up a bit, I would love to be able to do that. So it's just being able to take that time to think about these things ahead of time.
But I have to say this.
What?
I don't think there's any better gift than these.
Oh no.
Mixed coupons. So this is what Shelley, these are some examples of gifts that you give me. And I don't think anyone, could ever up this. I will organize one area of your choice. I haven't taken advantage of these yet. These are from like last year. A 30-minute massage.
Oh, I can see where this is going.
I'm not going to read that one.
This is
Or
naughty.
that one. Oh, that has something to do with Kama Sutra. 1 weekend off. I think I'm going to take advantage of this one soon. Ooh. Anyway, I had this in this folder because I was going to just pull it out and,
Redeem.
and embarrass you. But I'm definitely going to redeem those.
Yes.
But, you gave me a gift in that didn't take you long to put it together, but it was really meaningful to me, right? And it means a lot to me. And so someone might have a gift that they give that's amazing to anyone looking on the outside. But does that person really enjoy that gift as much as you think they do too?
Yeah.
Like we make so many assumptions. And I think we should just stop assuming and stop, thinking that way and just think, you know what? I thought a lot about the gift that I gave that person or, whatever. And just because they spent more time or more money on it doesn't necessarily mean that this other person is going to enjoy it more. Even though they might be like, oh my goodness, this is amazing, right? You spent 100 hours making me, these quilted socks. And that might seem really cool, but they're like, I don't like quilted socks. Right? I mean, there's a lot of things that we assume along with that. And so it might not even be a response that you vocalize. One of those responses may be just prepare, and just prepare to choose the thoughts that will help you to be more at peace. And whether it's about the relationship with that person or not, maybe you do want to keep a relationship with that person. You don't want to be mad at them. But in all reality, it's more also about your own personal peace, about how you're responding to that person. Because if you're at peace, then your relationship's going to be better.
Yeah.
No matter what. If you're contentious, even if you don't say anything, that relationship's not going to be as good. And they're going to sense that something's wrong.
Oh, yeah.
So anyway, I don't know.
Well, I think when it comes to boundaries, we've talked about some points, but I just want to make sure we tie in these three main points when it comes to boundaries. The first one is that we make sure we're setting a boundary from a place of love. That let's look at it from relationships that we value and that we would like to continue to keep, in our lives. That we're not just trying to throw them out and disregard them as if they have no value. When we are thinking about setting up a boundary, we need to make sure that we are in the right mindset as we're doing it, so that we are thinking about it from a place of love, where we feel love for ourselves and we feel love for the other person and for the value of that relationship, because that can really help guide how you want to set the boundary, because it's not about coming up with like sarcastic responses to a one-upper, right? That's not coming from a place of love. That's coming from ego, right? That's like wanting to like win the fight. And so we really need to make sure we're coming from a place of like real genuine love and with a desire to improve things and not make them any worse than they are. And so when we talk about this, it's like, okay, we really need to think about, how am I honoring myself in this situation? How do I still show love for myself? And how do I still show love for them, right? Because if we just plan our response to some of our responses ahead of time, and we are able to deliver them without any anger or hidden agenda or, with a sarcastic tone, there's no doubt they're going to feel that love come through our responses, and that helps the relationship. And I think also when we are trying to do it from a place of love, we really need to give them the benefit of the doubt and assume, this is like one assumption we should make, they're not doing it on purpose to really damage our relationship.
If they were, that would be a really evil thing to do.
But most humans
are not that evil.
No, they're not. They usually want relationships to be good. When we have a relationship that really sucks in our lives, especially with someone close, it has a trickle out effect, right? It ripples out. And if one is really sucking, man, we start to feel like so many things in our life suck. But as we improve our relationships, our entire life improves.
Well, it's a really important point that you just make, because one of the things that has helped me a lot is called relationship pyramid. And basically the bottom relationship is seeing the good in people, right? Seeing the goodness, seeing them in the best light. And if you see someone that way, you're going to want to have a better relationship with them. If you have a relationship with them, then you're going to want to listen and learn and be inspired by that person. And if you're doing that, then they're going to want to learn from you and experience that with you. And very little of the time do we really need to, correct that if we're living that way. But if your relationships are bad with one person, there's no way, because you start changing yourself to justify how you feel toward that one person, and therefore then your other relationships are all going to change because you are changing.
Yeah.
And that's what changes relationships. So if you change yourself in a positive way, in a more loving your neighbor kind of way, all of your relationships will be good. But if there's that one person who you have a hard time with, and you refuse to do the work that you need to resolve whatever those things are within yourself, and maybe you need to have a conversation with them, but that will affect all of your other relationships as well.
Yeah, it's so true. The second point is this. Setting boundaries has nothing to do with manipulating another person. It's not a tricky way to get them to do what you want. There's no hidden agenda. You're not trying to control their behaviors or what they say and don't say so that we can feel better. It is not about that at all. First and foremost, it's about you taking care of yourself. It is about that. It's self-love, and it's not selfish. It is very healthy. Boundaries are one of the healthiest things we can do for ourselves. They are a gift. I can't even tell you how many times just in conversation with friends, especially, I'll hear them talking about some situations they've been in that they're really struggling. And so many times I'm just like, healthy boundaries. Like healthy boundaries are needed here.
Gas fruba.
Yes. And so when we are setting up a boundary, it is not that, hey, we're against you. And that's why I'm setting this line. We're not creating enemies. And it's not like a right or a wrong thing. But this is a pro me. It's a proactive thing that we do for our health.
It's almost like setting up road signs or a road map, right? You know, there's certain things where, when you come to this intersection, there's a stop sign and you should stop and look both ways. I mean, I'm not going to get into how those relate. You can take those steps yourself, but you really do have to draw kind of a roadmap of how you want the evening to go or the week to go or whatever. And by setting these boundaries, I think it's a lot like driving, right? You're moving forward, and at certain times you got to stop and assess, and sometimes you got to move faster and take a turn. I mean, there's a lot of wisdom, I think, in creating that roadmap, and that's exactly what you're talking about. I just kind of like to liken it to certain things that make it a little easier for me to understand. And so when I'm going into a situation like we're going to go into this week, we're going to have a bunch of family, we have a bunch of activities, and I just know there's certain things that when they come up, I'm going to need to remember that right now there's a yield sign. So I should just let them kind of do their thing and then know that I'm just going to kind of wait or respond the way that I need to. And then when it's time to move forward, then I move forward.
Right. And the other thing I really like about this second point is that while it is proactive for ourselves, right, so that we are keeping ourselves in a good place, it is also proactive for them.
Yeah.
They're not going to realize this at first, right? But by us being able to set a healthy boundary for ourselves and how we're going to respond, we are actually helping them in their lives. It's like we're giving ourselves a gift, but we are giving them a gift as well, so that we are not continuing to foster resentment and anger within ourselves and then reacting on that. But we're giving them the best part of ourselves. It says, hey, I value our relationship, so here I am. I'm going to enjoy you the best that I can. So I love that it's proactive for ourselves and proactive for them because we love them. It's coming from a good place. Okay, point number 3. And I think this is the last one. If we find that we have gotten to a place where we're like, yeah, I'm done with this person, that is not the time to start setting a boundary. Like that should be a clue to yourself. Like, hey, you need to start thinking about a boundary with this person. Let's say it's an uncle or, a brother-in-law, whatever it is. You want that relationship to continue to go well. But if you just realize, okay, I didn't know about boundaries, so I've never set any, or I've kind of gone about it the wrong way and it hasn't gone successful, this is a good time to kind of stop yourself. Maybe it's that yield sign and say, you know what? I think I need to set a boundary, but maybe in a different way than I've done it before. But in the moment when you're like the fuming, that is not the time to try and say, I'm setting a boundary with you. That's the wrong time.
Yeah.
You're already in that emotion of anger, and you're probably going to say things in a way that is not going to come off well. And it's going to be reactive. And so that's not the time. So that's why a lot of boundary work is so much more effective when you can do it ahead of time, when you're calm and you're thinking about it. I hope whenever you guys are listening to this, it's at least a few hours or a day before your next activity so that you can be in a more calm and loving place as you set a boundary.
Well, if you're not thinking about it, you're just stressing out, right? Because a lot of us are about to head into family situations where we know we've already made the decision that we're going to be unhappy.
Right.
We've already chosen to have a bad time. That's not only is that sad, but it's also kind of an irrational thing when you know that you can just approach it differently and maybe try something new. And like you were talking about earlier with your friend that you were living with, get to a point where you know that you're going to give this much time and you're going to commit to that. And you're going to choose to be happy during that time. And maybe you choose to be happy only for 2 hours and then you give yourself permission to be mad or upset and just make sure that you're going somewhere else to do that.
Yeah.
But if you do that, I think a lot of times you end up having a much better time than you thought you would.
Yeah. It just reminds me of a story, and this is a holiday story that when I was getting trained to be a life coach, one of the coaches had told us, it was all about boundaries, and she was talking about how they were going to go on a family vacation with their in-laws, and they were like, we are going to be in one cabin. And we were going to be in one cabin for like 7 days, and they all had kids, and she knew how her, sister-in-law was very controlling and very detail-oriented, and she wanted everything to follow a very specific schedule. And she was explaining, like, I'm just not like that. And every year, I'm just mad and mad. Like, why are we even coming to this vacation? This is not a vacation. And then she talked about how she set a boundary, and it was very much related to time. And she just took the time to self-reflect and said, you know what? In the morning, this is what I do. In the afternoon, I can be with my in-laws for this amount of time. It was a great amount of time, 6 hours. But at night is when she found she was reaching her personal limit.
Yeah.
She did great during the day. And so she said, you know what? For that entire vacation, for 6 of the days, they made sure to have plans once dinner time came, away from the rest of the family.
That's brilliant.
Hey, we have some friends here that we're going to meet up with, or there's a restaurant we've been wanting to try. They made plans for every night except for one where they said, we are going to have dinner with the family this one night. Beautiful boundaries. She was talking about how much better the entire vacation went. The stress level was so much more down. And then they enjoyed their time together because they already knew they had a plan that was going to take care of, like, that boiling point. They took care of those boundaries ahead of time. And the beauty of it is that she didn't have to go around and tell anyone else what to do.
Right.
She made that plan for herself, for her family. They followed it. Beautiful. And the relationships were able to continue growing in a much more positive and healthy way. So the last point I think that I want to make is that if someone is really triggering some negative emotions in us and we really do think that we're done, I hope that we can start to look at that as like, a neon sign. Like, hey, there's work here for us. Not work that's negative, not just a survival thing, but hey, you can really expand how you respond to all kinds of people in the world. Don't just be limited. Don't limit yourself to only the people who have the same opinion as you on everything. Be able to talk to all kinds of people who have different personalities and different ways of scheduling things and everything. That is an invitation to us to level up in our own development and to really work on our own skills. It is an invitation. And sometimes I think we're so quick to dismiss it as like, I don't want to do that. I don't want to be involved. But with boundaries, it's an invitation and one that we should be excited to take. And when we show up to the party with a boundary in place, we enjoy it way better.
Yeah. That's beautiful. Is that it?
That's all my points.
That's
yes.
all your points?
Yes.
Well, I don't have many more things to add to that other than when we or I or you do this, I know that we are way happier. And this is something that I think has caused us to, I think, learn much more from other people. And as we're more curious about them, and as we are less interested in just being, I don't know, I don't even know how to exactly say this, but when we lose ourselves in others during that time, when we've committed to them, we will discover things about other people that will truly fascinate us.
Yeah.
And I just think that everybody's got something to offer that nobody else does. I think that's the beauty of humanity. I really do think that we all are so unique and different. We should never try to fit a mold because other people fit that mold. Like, we just need to be the best that we can be. And part of that is having joy and happiness. And sometimes we do need to sacrifice, and we do need to go into situations that we wouldn't choose. Now, I do this all the time. Like, we'll go into situations where you'll say, oh, we're going to go to this party or go out with these people. And, you know, I can be very social, but my natural tendency is I have a little bit of social anxiety. But when I decide to go and have a good time and go and ask questions instead of just, you know, being there, when I'm engaged in the social interaction, I end up having a really good time almost every single time. But it's a choice I have to make.
Yeah.
If I just do it because you said we should, and I'm like, oh, my wife's dragging me to this thing, and that, yeah, you are dragging me, but and on the way there, I am adjusting my mindset.
Yeah.
I am preparing for this situation that gives me a lot of anxiety, but I know that once I'm there, and if I am engaged and I actually am curious and try to get to know people, I have a really good time because people in general are fascinating.
Yes, they are.
So I don't know. That's all I wanted to add, but I'm really grateful for the way that you've approached this in our family, because I think a lot of times things could have gone really bad, but they don't. And I think we do have good relationships with our family because we have set boundaries.
Yeah.
And that's okay.
Yes. So for everyone listening, I hope you will be able to take some time early on in this week before everyone gets together, before the stressful events arise, and create some healthy, beautiful boundaries. Keep those relationships alive and let them enrich your own life. And you can also do this with your spouse, but we can talk about that on a different podcast.
Well, I also want to recommend that if you really want to start a conversation, get a 12-pack of Liquid Death sparkling water and bring it to your Christmas party, because everyone thinks it's beer, but it's not. It's just sparkling water. And I love this stuff. It's called Liquid Death. This is not sponsored by Liquid Death. I just happen to like it.
You just like it.
So those of you who thought I was drinking a beer, you're wrong.
Well, I hope you can take this information and that it will really help you enjoy your holidays much more than a lot of the stress that sometimes comes with it. So remember, the more you restore this type of intimacy within yourself, the more you can restore it with your spouse and other family members. Thanks for listening today, and we hope you will join us again next week.
Bye.